Hello everyone, my name is Kirill. You are on the AutoAdviser channel. Today we'll talk about halogen, xenon, and of course LED headlights. Guys, I have a small favor to ask. Most of the views on this channel are from the people who are not subscribed, so click on the red button under the video so that it turns gray, and don't forget about the bell. So, there are three main types of headlights on the market. As I said, these are halogen, xenon, and LEDs. So let's go through them in details. The oldest lamps are halogen tungsten lamps. In fact, these are the same incandescent lamps that we use in our everyday life. Inside, there are two electrodes between which the tungsten filament is stretched. An electric current flows under voltage and the filament emits light. A lamp is filled with a mixture of an inert gas and a small amount of a halogen, such as iodine or bromine, so that's why this lamp is called halogen. This gas mixture is inside under high pressure, thus increasing the life of this lamp, well, and some other characteristics. The lifespan of these lamps reaches 1000 hours. They work great and relatively are inexpensive. One of the disadvantages of halogen lamps is a relatively high power consumption. That is, they devour a lot of energy. The second disadvantage is inability to implement the so-called adaptive lighting, and we will talk about this type of lighting a little bit later. So, what is the conclusion? If you have halogen headlights installed on your car, just buy high-quality lamps and everything will be fine. The next type is high-intensity discharge or xenon lights. The light in such lamps is formed a little differently. They also have two electrodes, only nothing is stretched between these electrodes. That is, there is just a gap between them. Under high voltage, and this voltage reaches 25,000 volts, such a high voltage breaks through this gap between the electrodes and a spark or arc appears between them. Well, something like that. Inside the xenon lamps, there is a xenon gas, which is why they are called so. To obtain such a high voltage from the vehicle's onboard network, special equipment is required, which is called an electronic ignition unit. As you understand, this equipment raises the voltage from our usual 12 volts, which are used in the onboard network car, up to 25,000 volts, so in no case stick your fingers there. And so, inside xenon lamps, the light source is an electric arc that occurs between two electrodes under high voltage. Everything is very simple. The relative advantage of xenon lamps is their brightness, especially in bad weather, fog and rain. The main disadvantage, who would have thought, of this headlight is the installation in non-factory conditions. People want to get better lighting for their cars. They buy these xenon headlights and put them on themselves. All this leads to the fact that you blind the oncoming traffic. This increases the accident rate on the roads. But who cares if I have cool headlights, right? By the way, in some countries it is forbidden to install xenon headlights out of the factory. I do not argue. These are very good headlights, very bright, worthy. They look so rich with a beautiful blue shade. But it is better to buy them in the factory and not blind the oncoming cars. It is just not safe. And so the third type is LED headlights, a very common type now, and I believe that it will be even more widespread in the future. The principle of operation of these headlights is based on semiconductors. There are two types of semiconductors, P-type and N-type. And so at the place where they come in contact, when an electric current flows through it, a luminous flux is released and it all glows. But now in simple terms, four-second postulate says, in a quantum transition from a higher energy state to a lower one, a photon is released. This is simple, although it seems to be not. One LED does not shine much. But if there are a lot of these LEDs, then such a headlight can already compete with both halogen and xenon headlights. Therefore, LEDs are used in the so-called matrix headlights, in which there are a lot of them and each LED is responsible for its own angle and for some function. This is why, with the help of matrix pairs, you can implement a very complex behavior of the light. You can even program an animation, and if you haven't seen it yet, we will now show you. Will depend on whether you have an uncommon car or not, on how much you turn the steering wheel, on what speed are you driving and what weather conditions are. That is, the light is regulated depending on all these parameters. I even saw such studies that when a pedestrian appears on the road, some of the diodes turn off and do not shine into the pedestrian's eye. That is, it's still shining, but the pedestrian is not blinded. Let's look at the main advantages of LED lamps. The first is relatively low power consumption. They consume much less energy than halogen and xenon, so they save your fuel. The second advantage is lifespan that reaches about 100,000 hours, which is much more than for the previous options. And the third main advantage is the endless possibilities for creating adaptive headlights that will take into account all possible factors on the road, the weather, and so on. All this will increase the safety and also comfort operating the car. Of course, LED headlights also have their downsides. The main disadvantage is that they are not repairable. If something breaks, then we'll have to change this entire matrix headlight with all the LEDs in the kit, which, by the way, is very expensive. The second disadvantage is that fully adaptive lighting has not yet been developed, and there are some other nuances. So, conclusions. Since we live in the era of semiconductors, LED lamps are the most promising, although, of course, part of the functionality that I talked about today has not yet been implemented. Most importantly, I tried to explain to you the difference between halogen, xenon, and LED headlights, and also explained why adaptive lighting is trending now. I hope that this video was useful to you. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel. This was the AutoAdviser channel. All the best to you and see you again.